Sorry.
We have short memories, so.
That's right.
Michael Cohen, is the city planning to do anything to restructure the terms of its entitlement process, plan review, or permitting process to improve efficiency and promote much-needed housing growth? You could probably answer that in one word.
Yeah. Well, actually I can't. Yes and no. How about that?
That's okay, I'll allow that.
The answer is, look, to John Ram's credit, I don't know if John is here today, but since John came in, he's been working hard on a series of, really from almost a project management perspective, just better management within the planning department, case management of projects as they come in. There are some changes that have occurred. I won't go into the details, but the opportunity to take advantage of something called the community plan exemption under CEQA. We have, frankly, in this administration, we have completed the Market Octavia plan, the Trans Bay plan, the Rincon Hill plan, the Eastern Neighborhoods plan, and the sad part of all that is we sort of missed the cycle because only a fraction of that got built. So there are things we're working on improving, some major improvements to the CEQA process vis-a-vis transportation studies. Again, won't go to details, but it's a moving from the level of service standard to auto trip generation standard, which will greatly simplify that process. But it feels to me like every time we take 2 steps forward, we take 2 steps back. So the voters of San Francisco passed, we have a new Historic Preservation Commission, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer in historic preservation, but if you're trying to streamline the process, if you're trying to create certainty and efficiency, having a duplicative body that sort of overlaps with the Planning Commission and it's not exactly sure how and in what regard doesn't really help that process very much. And there will be an interesting debate coming forward very soon on the legislation implementing that, the relationship between the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission, and it's example of, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
All right, my friends, each of you will now have 1 minute to give us your most astute observation, most prescient prediction, or anything else you want to share with the group before we bring this to a close. We can start with John Haveman.
Okay. From a macroeconomic perspective, things are bad. The first quarter of 2009 is likely to be as bad as the last quarter of 2008. Things will head upward from there in the sense that the decline will be decelerating, not reversing, as I mentioned, until sometime in 2010. I think that what is happening in Washington right now is very good, but don't overestimate the ability of all the stimulus activity to pull us out of this. It will merely make the bottom less deep than it otherwise might be. So the stimulus activity deserves a lot of support, I think, even though it's very frightening how much money is being spent. More locally, San Francisco, as I mentioned, I think is very well poised to survive and thrive at the end of this. I think there's a lot of positive revolution going on in economic production that San Francisco will benefit from. So tomorrow may not be very close, but it will be a better day than today.
All right. Michael.
I would say that we have to be sort of careful about asking for help, because oftentimes asking for help causes things to stall. And if we do ask for help, we've got to get the help quickly. And sort of 2 examples of that would be, one, Steve made reference to the fact that the Financial Accounting Standards Board accounting guidance is coming out that's sort of softening the valuation issue for companies in terms of valuing assets. What that could end up resulting in is a lot of banks having the ability to not write down assets quite as much as they might otherwise have thought they had to write them down to, and as a consequence, they won't dispose of the assets, and as a consequence, they won't be able to get back to lending. So on the one hand, it's thought to be a help, on the other hand, it might actually forestall the time until which banks dispose of these assets and then end up getting capital to be able to lend. The other is in the Lungs Link tax credit area, where now there's this exchange program, which is wonderful because now developers don't have to look at selling their credits at 70 or 60 cents. They can go to the state and maybe get 85 cents. So you look at that and you think, great, more capital, that's a good thing. The problem right now is it's stalled. No one knows how the program's going to work. We're waiting for the states. So there's basically, if there was a recovery that might have happened in this market starting now, it's going to get forestalled 3 or 4 months as all of this starts to work through. So there's almost on the one hand, hopefully in the long term it'll help. In the short term, it's definitely frozen the market.
I've got a micro and a macro approach here. Here's the micro. There's going to be some great restaurants right over there in the Metreon. When that gets refigured, it's going to be a great center. That's the micro. The macro is I'm betting that runaway inflation does not happen.
Okay, I want to bring up 2 points. One is that in terms of San Francisco's economy, I think one of the concerns I have over the next year or so is what's going to happen in the retail and the leisure sector, where you're being hit by the problems in economies around the world now. Last year, the low dollar really carried the economy through, and this year that's not going to be there. You're not going to have as much foreign tourism helping to boost that, and costs to employers are very high in San Francisco because of the minimum wage requirements. To get back to the affordable housing side, I just want to bring up one thing that really didn't come up in this discussion, which is the role of the nonprofits. San Francisco has some very strong nonprofits acting in the city. There's the opportunity right now for builders in troubled projects to partner with them and look at the opportunities for perhaps doing a different mix of housing than was initially planned for the projects.
I have 2 or 3 just quips. One, as we all said, I think if you're going to be in a horrible market, San Francisco is the best place you can be, and I think that will continue to be true for the long run. I think you're going to see a continual thinning of the herd. I think we're not through the bottom of this in any stretch. There will be more stress in the real estate part of our world and the various companies around. The 2 cliches I have are, one, as we all know, we live by the rules. It's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. My add-on to that is it's never as bad as it seems, I hope. So it's going to get better. It's just going to be not as quick as we think. And then I finally found out that there are 2 things you don't do. One thing you don't do in a conference, and a real estate conference, and then 2 is my new way of ending. You never walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, how are you?" There's no upside to that question. And then 2, my ending is, if you've got your health, you've got everything.
So, you've probably heard before, but the Chinese character for crisis is a combination of danger and opportunity. We've heard a lot about the danger. I do believe there is an opportunity here for real structural change in the way San Francisco thinks about the business community writ large and the development process in particular. For a long time, it was impossible to convince policymakers that supply and demand mattered, that risk and return were correlated, and that prices go anywhere but up. But there is very stark evidence to the contrary in front of us. The key, however, is engage, engage, engage. I assume most of you are here because you care about San Francisco. You want it to be a vibrant, livable, exciting city. And if you really care about San Francisco, you can't rely on someone else to have your point heard. You've got to do it yourself. Thank you.
To the panel, thank you all very much.